hallmark fire for the department occurred when the New York State Capitol burned. At the time, the state capitol was one of the greatest structures in North America.
Okay. We're standing outside of what was once the reading room of the New York State Library, and at the turn of the 20th century, the New York State Library was considered one of the top 20 largest libraries in the world. It occupied most of the western end of the New York State Capitol. Unfortunately, on March 29th of 1911, around 2:15 in the morning, a fire broke out, not in the library itself, but in the Assembly Library, which was quite close by. People differ as to the possible cause of the fire. The official reports suggest that it was faulty electrical wiring. The wiring had been put in the 1880s, was horsehair insulated, and there had been problems with sparks and fused switches. However, there's another theory that says that politicians, after a late night caucus, had been careless with cigars or cigarettes. We don't know which of the two causes might have happened. The fire swept through the Assembly Library. The proofreader, Dwight Goey, got one of the night watchmen. He ran outside and pulled a fire box. The fire department responded within minutes. Eventually, 125 firefighters would be involved, 10 steamers and 3 ladder trucks came to the Capitol. Chief William Bridgeford had only been on the job for about a month, but he recognized the danger, not from the structure itself, it was stone, but from the load of paper that was in it. The fire broke through from a transom into the New York State Library, and by the time the firemen got here, while they tried to put it out before it engaged the library, they were unsuccessful. They were soon driven back by the heat and the stone, which being cooked from the great heat was falling. Some firefighters were injured, but no serious injuries were reported that night. They began their fire lines at the Senate chamber and the Assembly chamber, and they were successful in keeping the fire out of those chambers, although the chambers were heavily damaged by smoke and water. Meanwhile, the fire swept through the New York State Library from one end of one side of the building to the other side. By about 3 o'clock, one of the roofs had caved in and one of the towers had caved in. It was a devastating loss to the study of history here in New York State. Over 500,000 books and 270,000 original colonial and early American documents were lost in the fire. Fortunately, because it occurred in the middle of the night, and there were very few people in the building at the time. However, there was a night watchman by the name of Samuel Abbott. He was 78 years old. Someone reported him opening windows at the beginning of the fire, but he was, of course, missing the next day. His body was found 2 days later in one of the side corridors on the 4th floor, and he was the only casualty of the fire. The fire actually, though, did have some positive effects in the long run. 4 days before, there was a much more historic fire down in New York City. The Capitol fire occurred 4 days after the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, which cost the lives of 146 garment workers. That fire, with a reminder of this fire, served to make the legislature and the people of New York much more aware of the dangers of fires. A lot of fire code legislation and factory legislation was accomplished directly after the fire. And while most of the impetus for that came from the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, the fire here served as a reminder to the legislators and others that fire could occur anywhere.